misfire going up a hill with a little bit of load. I'll go full throttle, watch the shaker. See that? Misfire, misfire. Those are all misfires. Alright guys, I'll try to explain this the best I can. It was very hectic today. So what happened was, the car was running great when I bought it, and everything was fine. One of the coil on plugs may have come a little bit loose, or maybe not connected all the way, because sometimes they come apart. When I checked to make sure all the plugs were in tight, because I didn't want to have a spark plug blow out of the head and have to do a helicoil. I've had friends have that happen even with their 9-thread head cars. So it started to have a little bit of a misfire, and it wasn't in full throttle. It wasn't. It was just low speed, heavy load going up hills and stuff. And so I tried finding out which coil on plug was bad, and I wanted to start by taking all the ones out of the driver's side bank from my other Mach 1 and put them in and see if I can isolate which side, at least, the misfire was coming from. To my surprise, when I switched 4 stock coil-on plugs onto the driver's side of the car, the Mach 1 would not start at all, the yellow one. It would not start. It sputtered, it cranked, it did everything it tried to, but it would not run. And I was totally puzzled why it wouldn't run with 4 stock plugs on one side. I'll show you later on in the video the difference. The car came with these high-power aftermarket coil-on plugs when I bought it, but those are supposed to be plug-and-play. You're supposed to be able to just use those whenever you want. No modification at all. Just plug them in and go. So I was extremely puzzled to why it wouldn't do that. So I thought, well, maybe it's having a power issue with the computer. Maybe it's sensing that some of the plugs are more powerful than the others, or the voltage problems. So I decided to take all 8 plugs out of my Mach 1 and put them in the yellow one, all the stock ones. And it would not start at all. Same thing, sputter, sputter, sputter. It would crank, but it wouldn't start. This had me extremely puzzled. I was looking at MSD, boost to coil, boost to spark boxes. I was looking for anything under the car that might be causing this trouble. I looked by the computer to see if anything was wired in. Absolutely nothing. I found nothing wrong with the car. The wiring harness looked extremely clean and totally stock. So I was totally puzzled on this, and I was having a terrible time trying to figure out why the car would not start at all with stock coil-on plugs in it. Alright, we are definitely in the middle of a process here. Alright, the reason the car was not starting was because this was wired backwards. Positive to negative were in there backwards. Somebody went through and rewired every one of these. You can take the pin apart and flip it around. Hopefully no one else ever has to do this. Okay, so you pull this out. Just get behind it with a little screwdriver or some pliers and you pull this out. It's a release safety pin. Then you take a push pin and you put it in right at the bottom of the metal tip there. There's a little plastic tab down there. You push it down in there until you can kind of feel it release. Just you feel the pressure change. There's one on each side, and as soon as you get it, you can see this one's coming out. There. So out comes the plug, and you want the red on this side with this switch on the top, the big fat red power one or whatever it is. So you turn around and you want. So after switching those 2 wires on every one of the coil-on plugs, the car started right up, ran just fine. The stock coil plugs in there, and I'm very happy. The car has no misfires. I even went to the extent of changing all the spark plugs because the ones that were in it looked slightly shorter. I wondered if they were just not getting connection. So little to say, today was absolutely crazy. I pulled the spark plugs 4 times, changed them back because the new ones were really nice and they were gapped right. The other ones were gapped shallow for the bullet. They were extra ones I had around, and so It was an absolute crazy day, but I got it all done. I do want to give credit to Granatelli. They're the ones who make those aftermarket coil and plugs. They were really nice to take my call. We talked it over. We went over all sorts of ideas of what could be the problem. And I think he was the one who actually said, yeah, it might even be that the wires are backwards because it works in your other car. So shout out to them. All right, here we are. Third gear, 25 miles an hour, not a lot of RPM. Good load on the engine, full throttle. No shaking on that shaker. No misfiring now. There we go, perfect. Alright, so here's what we're up against. This is an aftermarket coil. See how thick that wire is? It's 400 times more powerful than a stock coil, which has this spring looking part of it. And they use the same boots, but they're upgraded. Now these are supposed to be plug and play. You can plug these in and they'll run in your 4-valve car. I'm sure they make them for 2 and 3 valves too, but anyway, they're supposed to just be able to plug in and run fine. And the problem was, whoever put them in this car decided that they needed to change the direction of the wires, because if you look, the plug's upside down on this. This is upside down compared to stock. So they must have thought they had to take the plug out, switch the wires, and because it's such a high powered unit and it's probably grounded differently or whatever, it runs fine in the car without this. Or no, with the wires backwards, it ran fine. It would have run either way fine. But once I took these out of my car and changed them with stock, this car would not run, period. It would not start. It cranked and cranked, but it would not fire. And so I ultimately was able to find the company who made these, talk to the people. They gave me some ideas. They'd never heard about this before. And then here I took stock ones out of my blue Mach and put these in its place, and it worked just fine. So now we knew there's something wrong with the car. And when I looked at the wiring, I noticed it was reversed. So that was a huge headache. I'm glad I figured it out. I was looking for a spark boost, boost to spark or whatever it's called. I was looking for all sorts of things. I was looking at the computer. I was looking everywhere to see if they had modified something, because it would not run at all with stock plugs, stock coil and plugs. So I'm glad that's over. That was a headache, but figured it out in a day. And anyway, so that's the update on the yellow Mach. It runs good. No misfires now. I think maybe it was misfiring because it had 7 of these. It had 7 of these upgraded ones and 1 stock one in there. And so the stock one was probably causing misfire because it was wired backwards and it wasn't going to work that way. I'm surprised it ran as good as it did, but now it runs really good and that misfire's gone.